Hi, this is Hall of Famer Eric Dickerson, and you listen to the Harris Highlight Show. Enjoy it.
Na 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 na. Coming to you live from downtown Phoenix, this is Season 2, Episode 10 of the Harris Highlight Show. Joining me this week are college football analysts Josh Schaefer and Lyle Goldstein with our executive producer Brady Klain. I'm your host for the evening, Blake Harris. Guys, I'd ask you how you guys are doing this week, but I want to start with Josh, who's rocking a very glorious Adidas-worn blue number 7 jersey. Josh, quickly, why are you wearing that jersey?
Because, as you saw on last week's show, if you watched it, I made a bet with Lyle about who would win the USC Notre Dame game. Last year he wore my USC jersey because USC beat Notre Dame at the Coliseum, and this year I'm wearing his Notre Dame jersey because USC decided not to show up on Saturday.
Well, on that note, I'm doing pretty well, Blake, thanks. So we're 1-1 now in the shirt bets. We'll see how the next two go, but I'm glad we could even it up.
Well, before we get started, guys, this week's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel.com.
New sponsor alert! Pew, 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 pew.
Sign up using the promo code SCORE2. Now, FanDuel, you don't get custom, awesome little promo codes, so we got to go with SCORE2, and you'll get free entry into the NFL Sunday Million and NBA Clutch Shot Contest with your first ever deposit.
Wow.
So you're saying I could win $1 million?
You could, but you do have to sign up using the promo code SCORE2. So if you guys want to win some money, get on that. All right, guys, now as we do every week, we do talk about the latest AP poll. So let's get things underway, guys. The AP poll came out, not as controversial as last week. I remember last week there was just rankings all over the place that we were just criticizing. But looking at this, I think this is probably one of the more better AP polls. A few new changes, and I'm going to start with Notre Dame cracking the top 10. Lyle, how does it feel to see the Irish there at 9?
Well, as a fan, it feels great. They just pulled off a great win this weekend, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more in a few minutes. I think moving up 4 spots is about right for them. They went from 13 to 9, a good win over a good team like USC. The top 8 didn't move, no surprise there. The fact that SC dropped 10 spots, you know how I feel about the AP poll at this point. I think that's too much, especially when you play a marquee team. I know Josh probably feels a little differently, but in terms of Notre Dame, I think 4 spots is about right for the way they played.
Yeah, I mean, if we're just talking about Notre Dame, I think that I had heard today a couple people talk about, and a couple other outlets had brought up that it was more of a Notre Dame, or it was more of a USC loss than a Notre Dame win, and now I do agree with that to some extent. Notre Dame obviously took advantage and exploited USC's weaknesses. Now, for the Trojans, falling 10 spots, in my opinion, is generous, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. But in terms of Notre Dame, I thought that they did a great job. Again, I'll touch on where I would have them in a bit when we talk about something else later in the show, but I think they're perfectly fine in the top 10, sitting around 9. I would put them at 8 over Miami. Notre Dame beat a very talented USC team that simply just hasn't had it the last few games.
You know, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I've had a big eye on TCU ever since day 1 of the show this year. They're sitting at 4th right now. I think they're flying under the radar at 4. I think those are one of those teams that you got to keep an eye out for because they could just secretly and quietly sneak into the college football playoffs this season.
Yeah, as I mentioned, this was a very uneventful week for the AP poll. I mean, for the most part, we got Notre Dame, who jumped up 4 spots. They were the team that moved the most. Everyone else, they just hopped up 1 or 2 spots, and only 3 teams really dropped. They dropped 1, and then, of course, SC fell 10, but I'm looking at this bottom of the list here, and we got South Florida and UCF, both teams that are still currently undefeated. South Florida fell 1 spot, UCF hopped up 2. So, guys, I want to get your thoughts on this. As I mentioned, undefeated, but yet they're like the Western Michigan from last year. They can't seem to move up, but I think it has to do with the teams they're playing. I mean, South Florida, they played Tulane. UCF did play a very good Navy team, but I mean, like I said, Western Michigan couldn't get any love from the AP poll voters, and neither can these two teams.
New team, same story. It's the same thing every year that you're going to have these non-Power 5 teams in the top 25 that just simply are winning football games but aren't playing enough competitive teams to be considered in the top 10. It's a different year. It's the same story every year.
Now, SC does fall 10 spots all the way to 21 after losing by 35 to Notre Dame. So I know, Josh, you said you weren't even going to have them ranked in your top 25. So especially Josh and Lyle, I want to get your thoughts. Do you think dropping SC 10 spots is fair?
You know how I feel about the AP poll at this point. I think they punish teams too much often, especially a USC team that lost to a very quality Notre Dame team. I would have moved them down 4 or 5 spots the same way Notre Dame moved up 4 or 5, but I wouldn't move them all the way to 22. I still think they're a good football team.
No, I think I might be looking at it a little bit of an extreme angle. You know, on first glance, if I'm looking at this, they're ranked at 21 behind Stanford, a team that they beat handedly a few weeks ago. They also have a better record than a better record than Stanford. I would have SC ranked higher in the top 25. If I'm being honest, I'd have them probably around 16 or 17, maybe even 15. But to be totally honest, I know we're going to touch on this in a few minutes when we talk about our own top 25s, I didn't even rank them. Do I think they're one of the best 15 teams in the country? Absolutely. But have they been playing like it? They have not been playing like a top 25 team.
But yeah, so 21, if they lose to ASU this week, they're going to fall completely out of the top 25. The top 8, of course, doesn't even change, which is very surprising. It seems like every week either teams are moving up 1 or they're dropping 1, but the AP poll decided not to move anyone, and as I mentioned, Notre Dame does hop in there at 9. Only one team fell out of the rankings this week, and that was Michigan. They were 19 last week, lost to Penn State. They're completely out of it, and I don't think Michigan's going to find themselves in the poll the rest of the year because that offense is just completely god-awful. So we're going to wait and see. But Lyle, Iowa State climbs in at 25 after a win at Texas Tech, a team that you weren't that high on last week. So look at that. The Cyclones, who it seems like the past 5, 6, or 7 years has been just one of the worst teams in the Big 12. But now here they come. They're starting to get hot. Really quickly, other teams receiving votes are Texas A&M, Mississippi State, San Diego State, Georgia Tech, South Carolina, Toledo, and Marshall. ASU not getting any votes whatsoever. A little shocker there, but hey, it's the AP poll. It does not matter.
There's also no teams in the top 25 with 3 losses yet, so I think it's going to be a few more weeks for ASU, and they're going to have to keep winning.
But overall, as I mentioned, no problems with the AP poll, but we almost did. We mentioned that there wasn't a lot of chaos this week as there was last week, because last week there was 7 ranked teams that lost. But looking at this list, Miami, they almost blew into Syracuse. Now, if Syracuse could have gotten the upset at Miami, they would have taken on the number 2 team and the number 8 team in back-to-back weeks, so that would have been something exciting to see. Oklahoma State, they escaped with a 13-10 win at Texas. So Texas, once again, another close loss. A Texas team that looks... I still can't tell if they're a good or bad team, but Oklahoma State, they need the Texas quarterback. I mean, you guys watched it with me. In that overtime, I think he tried throwing it out of the back of the end zone, but he just completely underthrew it to a wide open Oklahoma State defender. It was horrible. I can't even imagine what Texas fans were feeling after that. And then you look at this. Indiana almost got another upset. Sadly, they just couldn't get the job done against Michigan State, but they did play him tough. But Michigan State ultimately took over in that fourth quarter. South Florida, they stayed undefeated, but they squeaked one out at Tulane, winning by 6. UCF, they got a win over Navy. That was a good one. West Virginia, barely getting past Baylor. Baylor is still winless on the year, but West Virginia, man, they almost blew it to that one. Will Greer, I mean, we're high on him. We were talking how he's impressed this season, but if he would have lost it at Baylor, that would have been tough for West Virginia. And then Memphis, a very good game last Thursday night. I know a lot of people were hitting up my Twitter saying, did you catch the ending of it? They squeaked out a 42-38 win at Houston. So lots of close games. We almost saw the second week of chaos in the AP poll. Sadly not, but this week I think we're going to see a little chaos. But now we're going to transition into something a little fun, and that is the first ever edition of the Harris Highlights poll. For a few weeks now, we've been getting a lot of comments asking if we can create some kind of poll where viewers can vote on what teams they'd like to see in the top 25, and it was done this past weekend. Our executive producer Brady Klein put it together, and we gave it to you guys. I posted in the Q&A video on Sunday the link saying, okay, just pretty much make your top 25 25 with all the teams that are ranked and all the teams that receive votes, and 130 viewers put together their own top 25, and even you guys put together your top 25 as well. So guys, looking at the list, not a whole lot of changes. The first one that I did notice was Notre Dame was at 8, Miami was at 9, so that did flip-flop. So Lyle, good news is a lot of fans are pretty they're higher on Notre Dame than the AP poll voters are.
Yeah, I had them at 8 as well. I put them ahead of Miami just because Miami's gotten very lucky a few times. They've had some very close games, some thriller type of games. I think in terms of quality of talent and quality of teams, I think Notre Dame's a stronger team than Miami. But hey, like we said, it's all about your opinion and your vote. That's why we're doing the poll.
Looking at the list, we have some other flip-flops as well. The viewers flip-flopped Washington and Virginia Tech. They put Virginia Tech over Washington, as well as Michigan State and Washington State. They flip-flopped those two and put Michigan State over Washington State. And the final most notable one comes near the end of the poll, and that's between West Virginia and USC. The viewers have West Virginia at 21 and USC at 22. Now, Josh, I know when you filled yours out, you didn't even have USC in your top 25.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I thought mine was ranked pretty much the same as everyone else's except for Notre Dame and USC. And I think it was mostly because of the game this weekend for obvious reasons. I put Notre Dame at 5 and I put USC off the board. And I think the reason I did this was because there were no shakeups for me in the top 5, but everybody else, I kind of ranked it almost like a power rankings. And right now, like I touched on earlier, SC deserves to be a top 15 team because they are one of the top 15 teams in the country. But for the last 2, even 3 weeks, they haven't been playing like it, which is why I dropped them out, and which is why I put Notre Dame at 5.
And the final flip-flop was Memphis and Iowa State. But guys, looking at the list, as I mentioned, we had 130 people vote in the poll. 120 were first place votes for Alabama. Penn State got 5, Georgia got 1, TCU got 2, and can you guys guess who the other team was that got that first place vote?
I'm going to say Clemson.
Oklahoma?
The Miami Hurricanes received a first place vote. But looking at this list, I mean, it's very interesting to see where a bunch of people, rank teams. TCU, they got 5 second-place votes, 26 third-place votes. Georgia, they got 23 seconds, 73 third. So definitely interesting to see the kind of list that people did. I mean, there were people that put NC State in the top 10, Washington State in the top 10, Virginia Tech in the top 10. So
Where's Ohio State at in our polls?
3rd, 6th. They didn't move.
Are they? See,
What?
I know they've been blowing teams out of the water, but the fact is they've played Rutgers, Maryland, and Nebraska. I think there's some of these one-loss teams that are better than Ohio State, but I guess we'll have to wait and see in the upcoming weeks.
They also played Army and UNLV.
Hey,
too.
thanks for not putting Indiana in that category.
Oh, no problem.
But then you look at this list, and there's Miami who got like a 23rd ranked vote, so it all comes down to that. So very interesting. But if you guys are interested in creating your own Harris Highlights Top 25 poll, make sure you check out the Q&A video that I post every Sunday evening. You'll be able to find the link there, and you just create your own Top 25. As I mentioned, it's all Top 25 teams that are in the rankings and that receive votes as well. But we're going to transition right now. We have a few minutes to talk about some past games this week, and let's start out with USC and Notre Dame. A 35-point victory for Notre Dame. Now, if someone said they saw that coming, they're wrong, because I don't think anyone predicted this game to be within 35 points. I mean, that is, regardless of who you're playing in general, is tough, but against a top 15 team, that's insane. But guys, Josh and Lyle, you two are the most diehards here. What were your thoughts from the game?
Well, I didn't want to say it all week because, one, I didn't want to get Josh mad, and I didn't want to jinx anything. I thought Notre Dame was going to win this game, and I thought they had a chance to win it. I don't want to say handily, but maybe by 10 to 14 points. But like you said, I had no clue it was going to be to the extreme of this, 35 points. I mean, yeah, they got off to a hot start. I know there's a couple calls. I'll let Josh talk about that when after I'm done. But you got to look at Brandon Wimbush. So for those who don't know, I mean, he's not a great pocket passer. He does just enough. In the pocket, he's made some pretty nice throws, especially deep downfield, that opens up the run game. Him and Khalil Tate of Arizona, I think, are very, very similar. So he had a really nice game. Josh Adams, I'll get back to him a little bit later, but he now is starting to emerge as a Heisman contender as well. And then you look at the defense, and I think all the credit of that has to go to their defensive coordinator, Mike Elko, who came over from Colorado, because the Irish have all of their same defensive backs from last year. Almost all the defensive players are the same. You got to remember, this is a team that went 4-8 last year, and now their defense looks to be one of the top 10 in the country. So top to bottom, I thought this was easily the Irish's best game of their season, and it's going to get tough. You know, it's going to be just as tough from here on out, playing 3 or 4 more ranked teams, but it's an awfully good start.
All right, Lyle gets to boost up Notre Dame. Here's when I bring down USC. Let me start off by saying the Trojans did not show up to play a rivalry game, let alone a college football game on Saturday. And first of all, disclaimer before we get started, I'm not taking anything away from Notre Dame because, like I said, I ranked them as my number 5 team in the country. So that just shows that I'm giving all the respect to Notre Dame. I'm not wearing this jersey with pride right now, but I've said all day long when people bring up this jersey to me, I have a lot of respect for Notre Dame. Let me get started by saying USC got totally messed up early in the game with those 2 calls by the officials. From what I saw, Darnold was down and then the ball was ripped out of his hands. And I told Blake as soon as that happened, I said, the score will be 28-0 at halftime. Did I say that? Blake's nodding. I said it'll be 28-0 at halftime. And I said that USC was going to lose by 35 points. And they did. They lost 49-14. Then later in the half, so first of all, I thought that was a terrible call, and Notre Dame scored, 2 plays later? And then USC has the ball inside the 10-yard line, and on 3rd and goal, the defense gets called for defensive holding? By NCAA rule, that is an automatic first down for USC. So Notre Dame gets called for defensive holding. Now, this could be wrong, but I saw this all over Twitter as soon as it happened. So if anybody knows the exact answer, and we can pull up the rule that we saw on Twitter. But from what I read from multiple NCAA sources and analysts was that is an automatic first down for USC, and they did not get it. USC then has Chase McGrath, their kicker, who's been reliable, more than reliable, clutch all season long, shanks a very manageable field goal, and from that point it was downhill from there. Darnold didn't show up. Their bright spots, I thought, were Stephen Mitchell and Deontay Burnett on offense, but just this team that's just rattled with injuries, it needs to be the next man up, and it's just not. This team is playing uninspired. People are calling for coaching changes already. It's their 2nd loss of the year. For USC, it's a national championship or a Rose Bowl or bust, and it's been busted. But they're 6-2 right now. Nobody needs to be fired. Notre Dame was the better team from start to finish. There's no arguing.
My 2 takeaways from the game were, number 1, Sam Darnold. I think I was completely off on what I said last week, that he was going to have a huge game. He was going to come ready to play. For the most part, he was not even a factor. But apparently what we learned is, I think he has an ankle problem. Clay Helton said he's had an ankle problem since the Washington State game, so I don't know if that really held him back, but Josh Adams. Now, I criticized Lyle for comparing him to SAQUON Barkley, but I looked at the numbers. Josh Adams has almost the exact same amount of yards as SAQUON Barkley on a lot less carries, and he looked phenomenal in that game. So, Josh Adams, you have my respect and my Heisman watch.
If I can touch on this for just a minute. Sports Illustrated came out today with their new Heisman rankings, and they had Josh Adams 4th. It went Saquon, Bryce Love, Baker Mayfield, and then Adams. So a couple stats for you guys. Adams' yards per carry is 2nd in the country, behind only Bryce Love, so ahead of SAQUON Barkley, who's currently leading the Heisman race. The guy has 965 rushing yards on the year. He hasn't played in 9 quarters of football this season. And then last week against a very good USC team, rushes for 191 yards and 3 touchdowns. If he's not on the national spotlight by now, if you guys don't know him by now, I ask you, get to know him. I got a couple fan questions about this. Is Adams going to win the Heisman? And I said no, but now my opinion's changed. I think he's got a chance.
But yeah, just after watching that game, though, Notre Dame, if this team, like I said, somehow manages to win out, they are without a doubt deserving of a college football playoff spot. Even if they lose one game, because they play still a bunch of ranked teams, I still think they have a shot.
If they have 2 losses, I don't think so. But if they beat NC State, Stanford, and Miami, 2 of those games are on the road, I think absolutely.
Yeah, if they lose one more game, I don't think you can put them in. I think you can make the argument, but I don't see them getting in at all.
Moving on now to another game this past weekend, which was college game day, and that is Michigan and Penn State. Now, we all said coming into the week that we didn't think this game was even going to be any sort of competitive game whatsoever, and it wasn't. SAQUON Barkley scored within the first few minutes, and the game just went from there. Penn State, I mean, they got the easy win. They beat Michigan 42-13. Guys, Penn State, number 2 in the country right now. I know a lot of people are saying Clemson can be probably the most competitive team to play Bama, but I don't know. These Nittany Lions, they're looking good. And I'm just asking, do you guys think, and what you've seen so far, now granted, Michigan is not what they were last year, but do you think this Penn State team could give Bama a potential run for the money for the national title?
100%. And I think that if we had a pick 'em between Penn State and Alabama right now, I think it would be me picking Penn State for more than just the, hey, let's see what we can do in the Harris Highlights Pick'em standings. I would pick Penn State just because, one, it's a different pick, and two, they're a more exciting team than Alabama at this point. Plus, they've played better competition.
I mean, we've talked about SAQUON Barkley a ton, and for good reason. He's leading the Heisman race. But a little bit on Trace McSorley. I feel like we haven't talked about him a ton on the show, and I feel like people haven't talked about him a ton in general. I think part of that goes to a lot of NFL scouts don't think he has what it takes to be a good NFL quarterback. But you look at his stats. The guy's got 21 touchdowns on the year. He's got 14 rushing, or 14 in the air, 7 on the ground, and that clutch factor that he's got. We saw it in the Rose Bowl last year against SC. We saw it earlier in the year with the game-winning touchdown against Iowa. This Penn State team is scary, not to even mention that defense.
Yeah, I think if we had to do a pick-em of those two teams right now, and I've said this all along, I would honestly pick Penn State because, yes, Alabama 8-0. I think they're one of the only teams that have played 8 games so far. But I think I'd pick Penn State purely because they're getting more national spotlight. Who's been Alabama's biggest game? Day 1? Clemson? That it?
Or Florida State.
Florida State. I was thinking national championship. That's it. That's the only primetime national TV game they've had. They've had noon games that's been on, but that's not a primetime game. So until they play in primetime spot again, I'm not going to guess the number 1 team in the country, don't get me wrong. I don't believe that. I think what I've seen from Penn State on the national level is more impressive than what I've seen from Alabama because I haven't seen much from the Tide.
And Penn State's playing like a number 1 team right now. You know, they had a little bit of a scare against Iowa, who I don't think is a very bad team. They've had a couple of bad performances, but I don't think they're a bad team by any means. You know, we've talked about IU before. We've talked about Michigan, how I feel like all of these teams are mediocre or maybe a little bit better than mediocre. But to put it plainly, I think Penn State's playing like a number 1 team. The only reason they're not number 1 is that because Alabama has shown no reason to take them out of that top spot.
See, I look at Alabama. I think you're absolutely right. I don't think Alabama's done anything to remove them from that number 1 ranking. And call this a hot take if you want. I don't think the SEC is that good of a conference. The college football world puts them on this pedestal just because of their history. But if you look at it, I think there's 2 good teams. I think it's Alabama and I think it's Georgia. This Penn State team has been good. They've let up the most points they've let up this season is 19. If Penn State matched up against Bama, I think we'd be in for a really good one.
Well, it's definitely going to be exciting to see now. Penn State, they do have a very, very, very important game this week versus Ohio State. We'll get to our pick'ems later in the episode, but guys, it is time to move over to the Q&A. Brady, we got ourselves about 15 or so questions to get to, some very good ones. I think this might be our best week of Q&As to date. We chose from about 150 questions. Without further ado, let's get things underway, Brady.
How excited are you guys for the potential Pac-12 South Championship being played in Tempe this year?
Well, I don't think it will be. It's definitely got that intrigue at this point. It's very intriguing of a matchup. But right now, personally, I think these are the 2 hottest teams in the conference. You know, Arizona's led by Khalil Tate, who's been turning a lot of people's heads towards Tucson this year. And ASU is a brand new football team.
I'm really excited. I think this has a chance to be a really good game. Coming into this year, I thought there was no chance that this game was going to have any sort of implications in the Pac-12 South or the Pac-12 in general. But the way ASU's been playing, it's been unreal. The way their defense has been playing, especially over the last 2 games. And maybe I'm going to get criticized by the Sun Devil faithful for this. I want Arizona to win as many games as possible to make this Territorial Cup as good as it can possibly be.
Like Josh and both Josh and Lyle said, Khalil Tate's leading the way for this team. He's just flying super under the radar. And kind of like my whole Alabama theory, it's because he's not on TV. It's because he's playing on Pac-12 Network at 11 Eastern on a Saturday night. If he were playing some national spotlight games, like ASU will 2 times in a span of, I think, 3 weeks, that's big for the Sun Devil team. U of A's got to get that publicity, but they don't. I think no matter what team's record it is, hopefully it's better than last year's Territorial Cup game, and I think it will be because it's in Tempe and we actually get to experience it this year, but I think we're shaping up for a very interesting and somewhat surprising Territorial Cup game at the end of the season in late November.
Do I think it's going to determine the Pac-12 South? Do I think this game is going to determine the winner of the Pac-12 South? No, mainly because a lot of things still have to happen. Essentially, ASU and U of A both have to win out, which I don't think they will. but it's definitely going to be a much better game than last year. Last year, I think coming into the game, ASU had 5 wins, and I think U of A had only 2 wins, so not a lot of good football there. But this year, they both can have 7, 8, or 9 wins coming into the game, so I'm definitely excited. But if somehow, someway this happens where the winner of this game goes to Santa Clara and represents the Pac-12 South, that game is going to be truly unreal.
How about our boy Zane Gonzalez hitting his first game-tying field goal this past week, 54 yards, and he cleared the uprights.
He had 3 big field goals this weekend.
Granted, they lost 12-9. What a score.
What a game.
Baseball.
Zane Gonzalez doing all the scoring once again.
The most valuable player on the Cleveland Browns, unfortunately.
Now that Joe Thomas is out for the season, yeah, you're right.
And DeShone Kizer, I hate to say it's been an absolute joke
Cody
so far.
Kessler looked better than Kizer.
He did.
Well, that doesn't take
Hey,
much.
at least USC got 1 win this week. I don't know they lost.
But no, Zane Gonzalez, 3 huge field goals. We were talking that he might be benched or cut from the team a few weeks ago, but it looks like now he's secured his starting job once again.
Just shake it off, as Taylor Swift said so famously. If Notre Dame makes the playoffs, would we see 2 Power 5 conferences shut out of the Final Four, and which 2 conferences would it be?
I think if I had to pick the 2 Power 5 teams that would miss out would be the Pac-12 and the Big 12. However, it's just an interesting thing, especially with Bama and Georgia, because if they're both undefeated going into that SEC title game and it's close, I'm interested to see if they let them both stay in the top 4.
As unfortunate as it is for Georgia, I think they're bound to have one more loss, and I think it's going to be to Alabama. So the biggest problem with that is that if Notre Dame somehow makes the playoffs, that means Georgia is also going to have one loss, and I feel like Georgia is going to miss the cut rather than have TCU, because that way it gives you a little bit more of a conference differential. So I would say the Pac-12 and the Big Ten.
This is the exact reason why the playoff needs to go to more than 4 teams. I'm not going to pick a comp because I really don't know. I could see. I'm not going to say Big Ten because I could see Penn State jumping in there. I'm not going to say ACC because an ACC team could make a late push.
I forgot about the Big Ten. I forgot about Penn State, so I would say just the Pac-12.
Yeah, I'd say just the Pac if this happens, because your SEC is going to be represented by either Georgia or Bama, and then it's just a free-for-all from there.
You really think TCU is good enough to get in?
I do. I honestly do. I honestly do.
And
Lyle, and if I don't think they are, I'm never going to voice it because I still think Wilton Speight can win the Heisman.
I don't think
God.
See, if I had to...
And I think I can win the Heisman, Brady.
Hey.
I just think TCU slips up at some point. They've been playing very well, yes, but this seems to happen to them every time they're in the top 5 or 10. They slip in the second half of the year.
I think that there's only 2 guaranteed that's going to make it. One being the SEC. It's going to be either Bama or Georgia. But it's going to be very interesting if they both go undefeated, whatever happens in that title game. Because like you said, if Georgia, or even if Alabama, if they lose within 7 and it's close, they deserve to be in there. And I'm going to say Big Ten, they're definitely going to be in there because, one, you got Penn State, you got Wisconsin, you got Ohio State. I think one of those teams is definitely going to get in somehow. But the ones I'm very concerned about, the ACC being the first. Now, I did mention I do think Clemson is one of the 4 best teams, but they still got to play NC State. And I know Florida State has fallen off, but they still got to play Florida State, which is always a tough matchup for them. And then they end the season out South Carolina, which I know South Carolina is not the best team. They did receive votes in the AP poll, so they're no slouch. So they still have the ACC title game as well. So I think they can slip up. And a team like NC State, I don't know if they have what it takes to make it to the push. So it all comes down to Clemson. But if Clemson has one more loss, I think the ACC is officially out, and the Pac-12 now. With SC, I think SC now, barring some just miracle, I think they're completely out of college football playoff implications, which means it all comes down to essentially Washington and maybe Washington State, but they're at a stage now where they're still like ranked 12, 13, 14. They're going to need a lot of help, and even then, they have to play each other at the end of the year in the Apple Cup, and then they got to go to the Pac-12 title game, so I don't think a Pac-12 team is going to make it, so a lot can happen, but I think the only 2 guarantees are the SEC and Big Ten.
Is Miami as good as their undefeated record shows?
Absolutely not.
Nah.
Absolutely not.
No, but the turnover chain is probably the swaggiest thing in football right now. And
Very
I
true.
said swaggiest.
Malik Rozier has been very good, though, so some credit to him. That's the Miami quarterback, but we'll see how they fare in the next few weeks.
Is it time for Will Grier to be in Heisman contention?
No, I don't think he is quite deserving yet, but also, like my man Lyle Goldstein always says at this point of the season, because he's 100% right, it's SAQUON Barkley and then everybody else.
Like I said, Heisman's won first 6 games of the year. And Wilton Spate's winning it.
I mean, the stats do pop out at you. The fact that Greer's thrown for 2,467 yards on the year and 26 touchdowns, it's pretty unreal.
How many interceptions, though?
5.
Wow.
So it's, I mean, the rate's pretty good. His
5-1.
His QBR is like 172 right now.
That's really good.
So, should he be in contention? The numbers are there. I just don't know if there's any room for him to get an invite to New York.
Well, Florida and Florida State both make a bowl game.
Now, Florida State, I don't know what the exact number is, but I think they're like on a 35 to 40 year consecutive streak of making a bowl game, which is truly remarkable when you think about it. They've been winning at least 6 games for the last 4 decades. I'm not entirely sure. I think they only have 2 wins now. They still got to play Clemson. I personally, surprisingly, don't think they do. Florida, I think they'll make it to 6 wins, but who knows? Stranger things have happened.
I think Florida gets there, but right now the Seminoles are starting to look like the Detroit Red Wings for all those hockey fans out there, where they need to do something at this point in the season to figure out how to not only keep their streak alive, which obviously isn't their main priority, they need to get to postseason football, meaning a bowl game. I don't think they get there. I simply think the program, not the program, but this is a broken football team right now. And I hate to say it, but I don't see a way that Jimbo Fisher gets his team to a bowl game.
Florida, I think, gets into a bowl game with 6 or 7 wins. Florida State, I don't see it happening.
Question for Lyle: does this Notre Dame win over USC make up for the Bush push over a decade ago? And that is probably that's one of the best questions this week.
That's a pretty good question. I was grinning ear to ear at the end of that game, so make up for it. I don't know. It certainly healed the pain a little bit. I don't know if it fully made up for it.
If Notre Dame can go, sorry, I'm going to butt in.
Go ahead.
If Notre Dame can figure out a way to get in the playoff and get to the national championship, win or lose, I think it could make up for it. But
It'd make up for that one in, was it 2012?
2000, what?
The national championship.
Oh, God, that 2012 championship. I was there, for anybody who doesn't know that, and that was a disaster.
Whoever sent this question in, round of applause. That's a good question. I like that.
It's a very good question.
You're bringing in a little bit of everything. With all other Power 5 conferences having clear-cut front-runners, who is the best team in the Pac-12 currently?
This is tough. I'm going to say it's probably still UW. While their loss was pretty embarrassing to ASU, the fact they couldn't get any offense going, I still think they're maybe the most complete team in the Pac-12, although I think you can also make the argument for USC despite having the 2 losses.
If we're looking at who has the best team, I just simply can't pick UW. I think regardless of how USC and Washington State are playing right now, I think it's one of those 2. In terms of power rankings, I think it's the Sun Devils.
I agreed with you last week on that one. I'm going to go with you again, but best overall team, I think it's Washington. It's those 2 teams in the upper northwest corner of the United States. I think northwest corner of the United States. I think it's Washington and Washington State, purely because each team, I think, only has 1 loss. So that's the only reason why. Power rankings, though, Josh, I'm putting ASU up there. I think it just got ranked 2nd in the Pac-12 in one of the Pac-12 network's power rankings.
I think the Sun Devils are the hottest team in the Pac-12, but I'm not ready to say they're the best yet.
Yeah, well, the Sun Devils are definitely hotter than I thought they'd be, but if we're talking about like current Pac-12 teams, the 2 that I'm going to go with are both the Arizona schools, because both of them have been playing the best football in the Pac-12 arguably over the last few weeks, which is still a very surprising thing to say.
Is Texas good and just unlucky?
They are.
With almost beating USC, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State this season?
They are probably one of the most unlucky teams in all of college football this year. I mean, they have had some games that have just been pure heartbreak for them, as we saw this past weekend against Oklahoma State. And then, as I mentioned, you also got USC, and then you got that Oklahoma game in which they should have won. 3 games they easily could have and maybe should have had a win in.
Their schedule's been very tough, and there's no doubt about that. But these guys put up 10 points on Oklahoma State. That defense is not good by any means. Sam Ehlinger, for a guy who's now taken over the starting job in Texas, he looked god-awful in that game. That we already talked about the play in overtime. But you're putting up 10 points on Oklahoma State, and that Oklahoma State defense, that's on you. I don't call that unlucky.
Yes, they're unlucky, but they're also, this year, not good. And I've always been this has always been a big component of mine, thinking of coaches and their teams. Coach Herman there down in Texas, has none of his recruits, none of his players, and he had to, if he wanted to, change the style of offense, defense, special teams, everything, coaching style, new coaches. Absolutely everything has been changed in that program from last season to this. So I don't think that's why anyone's saying Herman should be fired. He should be gone because he's in his first half season with this team. No recruits, new coaches, and you have to, yes, they have all summer ball, spring ball, all that. But you got to learn your new plays. You got to learn your new players. You got to learn your new coaches. You got to learn everything. So I think it's such a hard adjustment to be thrown into a powerhouse that is Texas and succeed your first year.
Well, I think he'll have another couple years. There's no doubt about that because Herman's a good coach.
Be fired.
But this is something that Josh touched on. Credit to him. Yes, they're not his recruits, but these are still top 4 or 5-star guys. It's not like Texas is getting a bunch of bums down there, especially with Tom Herman as a coach. They have some good recruits, but yes, I agree that having his own guys will help him in the future.
Yeah, I agree with you with both of you guys. But side note, I am so surprised at how much Lyle and I have agreed throughout this entire season of this
Maybe
show.
it's because you're wearing a Notre Dame jersey.
I lost a bet. It's not my fault.
Well, last year I was incredibly high on UW. He wasn't, and there was a lot of headbutting about that. But
And Blake wasn't high on Clemson. Just remember that.
Shall I say Hunter Renfro?
Will a team like UCF or USF, the 2 lower Florida schools, but still good schools in Florida, will they ever have a shot at making a playoff?
Playoff, no, but I think if one of them continues to win out, they'll be like Western Michigan and they'll go to a pretty good bowl game.
And they get demolished.
I hope not, but probably.
Yeah.
They'll have a shot if they ever extend it to 8. But 4, I don't think they can ever hit the top 4 range.
I think they need to do it like NCAA. 64 teams, just bring them all in for the playoffs and just have a full bracket.
Like March
I've
Madness.
been
Like March
saying
Madness.
that for years.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
You get rid of the first 3 or 4 games of the year where you're playing irrelevant teams, and you just make a straight, maybe not 64,
How about this?
32.
So you can play more
32.
games.
Agreed.
You only play half. You play a half of a game.
No, you don't do
Turning
that.
into a whole different question.
But quick shout out to Quentin Flowers, the South Florida quarterback. 19 touchdowns on the year. He's thrown for 1,245 yards. He's rushed for 613. He's been unreal, and he's the face of that South Florida Bulls team.
Do you think Baylor could be decent next season and have a turnaround similar to what Notre Dame had this season?
100%. I think they're going to struggle the rest of the way. I think they'll be lucky if they get more than 1 win in this season. However, like I said earlier in the show, I don't think you can argue that this team is getting worse. They are improving throughout the season.
They looked very good against West Virginia in the 4th quarter.
Yeah, and they've looked good against a couple of top-tier teams in the Big 12 this year that they've played, but they just can't get a win. So I think they improve. Again, they need to start getting better recruits. Their coaching staff needs to figure out what in the world they're doing with the program, and then they need to get this thing back on track.
I think they'll be better, but to say they'll have a turnaround similar to Notre Dame's in the sense of where you go from being 4-8 to a playoff contender, I think that's a stretch. But I think they can definitely be 6-6 or 7-5 next season.
Now you look at their schedule, and in every game except for 1, they have been close. They did lose to Liberty by 3, UTSA by 7, Duke by 14, Oklahoma by 8, Kansas State by 13, and West Virginia this past week by 2. So they are losing, but they're not complete blowouts. Like, they're in every game, but it's like Josh said, they just can't get it done.
Their next game, though, is in that Battle of Texas. It's against, I believe it's Texas. It's Baylor, Texas this week. So that's going to be a fun one. It's in Waco, too. So who knows? They could get a chance of getting a win now. Should we base the rankings more on solid wins, as in like ranked wins and the dominance and margin of victory, or record, like it is now?
Well, that was actually one thing that I saw a lot in high school, more so in terms of basketball, is you would take your record and then at the end of the season, you would base it off of how many teams from other conferences or sections you played against, and if they were of a quality or if they were of a quality division or team, whatever the case may be. I think they need to take more of that into account in college football. I think record obviously plays a big deal, but I think people forget how important quality wins are, or quality competition, which is why, again, I'm not trying to call out any comments because they're good questions, but that's why we get questions like, should UCF or USF be in the top 10? No, although they're undefeated, they haven't played enough teams of a quality standard that have propelled them into deserving a top 10 position. So that's why I think we should base this more off of quality wins than record.
I like quality wins over just record in general because there's some teams out there that have 2 or 3 losses that are often better than 1-loss teams. An example being last year. By the end of the year last year, USC was easily a top 4 or 5 team in the country. However, they didn't get to go to the playoffs. So I think it's all about how hot you are and the teams you've beaten. So while I think it'd be cool to see a team like South Florida in the top 4, it's just too tough. They don't play enough top-quality opponents.
Well, I mean, I definitely think it should be based off of ranked wins and dominance as opposed to what your record is. But like I always say, it comes down to the College Football Playoff Committee, and that's what they look at. They look at who you've beaten, how you beat them, who you've lost to, like what the teams that you've beaten have done. So the AP poll, they obviously don't really look at that much. But the College Football Playoff, what they've been doing so far looks like it has been working. Are there some flaws? Yes, but, you know, they're trying to get the job done as best as they can. As always, another amazing Q&A. Make sure you ask us questions every Sunday evening whenever I post the video. But Lyle, get out of your chair, go and ring those bells because it is time for the pick'ems.
Oh, I'm ringing those bells. I'm so happy we brought them back. We didn't have them the first few weeks, but it's great.
What game were we at? Were we at the Suns game when they started ringing our pick'em bells? Was that what it was,
Yeah,
Josh?
yeah.
It's the gorilla. Yeah, he jumped up on a rope and started ringing a bell.
He started,
like they do in Hell's
he
Bells.
started ringing our pick'ems bells. But guys, before
Spoiler alert, there was no bell. He was just jumping on
He was
a
just
rope.
pulling a rope.
Before we do get on this, make sure you join the Harris Highlights Pick'em League. It's never too late, but it's 99%. Yeah, it's way too late. Josh, I know it's too late for you because you forgot to make picks one week, and that completely threw your entire season
I was
off.
in second place, and then it counted for 10 incorrect
I'm the
picks.
inverse of Josh. I think I've only made picks 1 week.
But as I mentioned, guys, all it takes is 1 week to put you in the lead, and this week we have a new leader, and that is Ben Muckers, who has 64 points. But guys, speaking of points, we do have our own point system for our pick'ems. Still in last place is yours truly with 44. Now, I will say this. There were a few games where I was the only one to pick a team to win, and they came through. What killed me was the USC game and the ASU game. Had I gotten both of those right, I would have been within 3. But sadly, I didn't, and I'm not. Tied for second are Josh and Lyle with 51, and taking the lead is Brady with 52. He had an amazing week.
It is close between the 3 of us. Hey, props to you. Props to
Hey,
you.
I'm still coming for you guys, okay? I'm still coming. I have 44.
No, you're not.
I'm coming for you guys. All right, guys, the first game of the week. Number 11, Oklahoma State at number 23, West Virginia.
Oklahoma State's the better team in this one. I think there's no doubt that this game is going to be an offensive battle between the Mountaineers and the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys get it done in Morgantown.
You know, Josh and I have agreed on a lot of picks this year, but after what I saw last week from Mason Rudolph and that Oklahoma State team in general putting up 13 points on Texas, I'm going West Virginia with the way Will Greer's played this season.
I think this will be Oklahoma State's marquee win. I think they're going to get a good one on the road. I'm going Oklahoma State because, I'm winning in this now.
I'm glad I'm not the only one, Lyle, coming into this. I really like West Virginia. Oklahoma State has scared me recently. I'm going to go with the Mountaineers. Cal at Colorado.
This is another really interesting game. 2 teams that are 1-4 in the Pac-12, 2 teams that are 4-4 overall. I'm going to take Colorado in this one simply because it's a home game. I thought that Cal was a well-rounded team, and I still think they are, but clearly neither team is where we thought they would be at the beginning of the season. So I'm going to go ahead and take Colorado at home.
I like Cal between the way they upset Wazoo and the way they've been playing recently, especially behind their leadership of Ross Bowers. I'm going with the Bears.
I'm going to go with Colorado this week purely because I want ASU when they play them next week, getting way ahead of myself, to get another win against a team that has more wins, just so it looks better for ASU. To win Colorado for that.
Once again, I'm agreeing with Lyle. I like Cal. They've had some good wins this year, and Colorado, I think they've lost 4 in a row now or something like that. They have not looked good, so Golden Bears. Shout out to my friend Harrison that's part of my frat. I'm going with the Cal. Indiana at Maryland.
These are 2 teams with very similar records, both 3-4 overall. IU 0-4 in conference, Maryland 1-3 in conference, and I want to take the Terps in this one, but I'm actually going to take the Hoosiers. I like Cobbs in this game at wide receiver. It's a great receiving matchup between Cobbs and DJ Moore for Maryland, but I don't think Maryland's quarterback Bortenschlager can lead them to a win this week. I'm taking IU on the road in one of the best Big Ten games of the season thus far.
Well, Josh touched on it. This is going to be a matchup of two great playmakers who don't get a lot of national spotlight, both receivers that wear number 1. I'm going to go with BK. I like Simi Cobbs. We haven't gotten to talk about him a lot, but Indiana's played in some tough, close Big Ten games. I'm going to go with the Hoosiers.
Simi Cobbs is the, I think, 3rd or 4th highest used 3rd down wide receiver in all of college football.
There's our BK stat.
There it is. Yeah, so N'Keal Harry's up in that list too, by the way. He's, I think, 5th or 6th.
No surprise.
Because ASU has a lot of short. Is there really any question about this one? I'm going with the Hoosiers. Peyton Ramsey up at quarterback, redshirt freshman. He's been playing well. Finally a mobile quarterback for the Hoosiers and someone else to obsess on besides Dan Feeney, an offensive lineman from last season.
I gave you crap about that earlier this week.
It was great. But I mean, Simi Cobbs is the real deal. We're going to see him playing on Sundays next year if he leaves or in 2 seasons. But a very good arsenal of wide receivers that the Hoosiers have. Good quarterback play for them. Questionable reads. Ramsey's passes has been really well. He's been passing very well, but his running game has been questionable. And Tigray Scales, one of the top linebacker in the Big Ten, 2nd Big Ten in tackles. I think 5th or 6th in the country in tackles for the Hoosiers. Tigray Scales, that's the name to watch out for. Number 8 on defense. He's your linebacker. He's your guy that's going to fly all over the field. And also Ja'Shun Harris on special teams. Kind of reminds me a lot of an Adoree Jackson. Don't look at me. I never get to talk about my team this much. So come on, let me speak.
You're all good.
Ja'Shun Harris, the 3rd. He's kind of a guy similar to an Adoree Jackson. Doesn't have, obviously, the pure athleticism, but he has 3 punt return touchdowns on the year so far. Looking for some more. So I think, it's pretty obvious I'm picking the Hoosiers in this game, but for those reasons, I'm going Hoosiers.
Hey, you just told me on my pick.
I like what Indiana's been doing the last few weeks. I'm going to go with the Hoosiers. Virginia at Pitt.
This is another really interesting game. I've said that for the first few. But Virginia is flying under the radar. They haven't really beaten a lot of outstanding teams, but Virginia, I think, is flying under the radar. They beat Boise State, a team that has had a little bit of a resurgence. I don't think they're a top-tier team. I don't think Virginia's beaten any top-tier teams, but they're 4-1 in their last 5 games. I think Virginia gets it done on the road against Max Brown and the Pitt Panthers.
I like Virginia in this game. They've played some teams tough, like Josh was talking about. Pretty good in conference so far. Pitt's been struggling. Max Brown hasn't been great. Virginia's looked good in conference this year. 2-1 record, like Josh mentioned. They've played some teams tough. Max Brown hasn't looked great, so I'm going with Virginia.
You guys got me pretty sold on this. Max Brown was a major focal point of USC last season, not for the right reasons. And he hasn't been a major focal point at his new team, Pitt, this year. I'm going to go with Virginia. I like the way that the Hoos are playing.
Go Cavs. Arkansas and Ole Miss.
I'm going to take Ole Miss in this game. They've got Arkansas at home. I thought Arkansas was going to be playing better in conference, but like we said, the SEC just really isn't that great this year. I'm going to take the Rebels at home to get the win over the Razorbacks.
Man, when you look at these two teams, neither of them have any type of quality wins on their schedule, so it's kind of just pick your poison, but I'm going to go with Ole Miss.
I'm going to go with Ole Miss in this one. I think, when Michael Orr played there in The Blind Side, it really got me going. So that's why I'm picking Ole Miss.
They showed him for like 10 seconds at Ole Miss in that movie. Well,
Kathy Bates' speech was very inspiring, Lyle.
I flipped a coin and landed on heads, so I'm going to go with Arkansas. Mississippi State and Texas A&M.
We're getting to the point of the season where things start to get really interesting, and we're seeing a lot of very even matchups this week, whether they're good or whether they're bad. I'm taking Mississippi State on the road. This was another game-time decision for me because I'm looking at both records right now. We're getting to the part of the season where things start to get really interesting, and these two teams are very similar, just like most of these pick'ems have been. I'm taking Texas A&M simply because it's at home, and we all know the home field advantage that the Aggies have at Kyle Field in College Station. The Aggies, I think, get it done. They're 4-1 in their last 5 games, with their only loss coming against Alabama 27-19. I think the Aggies just pull this one out at home.
Outside of that Week 1 collapse to UCLA, the Aggies have actually been pretty good. 1-4 their last 5, like Josh talked about. They've looked really good on both sides of the ball. They got a good win against Florida. So between that and it being at home at Kyle Field, I got to go with the Aggies.
Gigamags. I'm going Texas A&M in this one. I think they have one of the top home field advantages. They're the real 12th man. Sorry, Lyle, Mr. Seahawks fan.
Wah.
Who won that lawsuit?
Texas A&M.
A&M won it.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said that. I'm going to go Gigamags, Texas A&M, home of the real 12th man, Lyle. So those Seahawks ain't got nothing on Texas A&M.
We are now the 12s, not the 12th man.
Oh, right.
I mean, Texas A&M, they blew it against UCLA in week 1, and then they barely lost to Bama, so they've been good recently. I'm going to go with the Aggies on that one. The number 15th ranked Washington State Cougars at the Arizona Wildcats.
There's not much of a home field advantage at Arizona. However, if Washington State can figure out a way to contain Khalil Tate, they win this game with ease. I think Luke Falk figures out a way to pick apart the Arizona defense, and the Cougs take it down in Tucson.
I think it's going to be a very good game, especially with the way Khalil Tate's been playing. But when it comes down to it, I still got to go with Wazoo. I still think they're a very quality football team. Luke Falk's a really, really good quarterback.
You know, I don't really care who wins this game as long as we get an interesting Mike Leach press conference after the game. That's all I'm concerned about.
That's all you can ask for.
So, because I want a happy, straight-faced Mike Leach, I'm going to go with Washington State.
I like the Wildcats in this one. I like Khalil Tate, and I feel like this is going to be the first game where I don't know what time or what channel this game is on, but I feel like this is the first game where Khalil Tate is finally going to be on the national spotlight, and he's going to do something about it. Number 4, TCU at number 25, Iowa State.
Well, Brady, you've sold me, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I'm taking TCU.
That's one.
So am I. They've looked really good, so I'll give them the credit they deserve for another week. Horned Frogs.
Hey, that's 2. Go Frogs. That's 3.
I really want this to be my upset pick of the week because Iowa State, I was looking at their schedule and some of their highlights, and they have been surprisingly impressive. If it wasn't for a blown game on a Thursday night against Texas, they would only have 1 loss. So Iowa State, they are home. I am going to go with TCU, but guys, Iowa State, if any team is going to have any upset this week, it's going to be the Cyclones.
Blake doesn't want to fall further behind in the pick'ems.
I really like the way Iowa State's been playing, but I'm much more impressed with TCU than I am Iowa State.
Number 14, NC State at number 9, Notre Dame.
We continue to say that Notre Dame has one of the toughest schedules in the country. Maybe not even for the first 5 weeks, it seemed like, but in reality they do, especially going forward. I think NC State's a good football team. I just don't think they can keep up with the Irish.
Man, the Irish have no time to rest between last week and this week, do they? They've looked really good. We touched on it earlier. Their defense hasn't allowed 3 touchdowns this season. The most they've allowed in a game is 20. While that NC State team has looked really good, I think they're going to give them a good fight. I like the Irish.
Notre Dame's coming off their biggest win, in my opinion, in the last 3 years. 2 years ago, it was just scattered throughout. They played well. Last year, like we all know, lackluster. I think they were, what'd you say, last 4 wins?
4-8. They were 10-3 in 2015.
Yeah. So this win against USC is their most impressive win in the last 3 years, hands down. So they're going to ride the momentum. The game's in South Bend. The great Mike Tirico's on the call for that, as always. God bless Mike Tirico. I'm going to go Notre Dame over NC State.
I was high on NC State coming into the year. I think they're a good team, especially out of the ACC. I think they're going to give Clemson a run for their money. I think that matchup might be next week, NC State versus Clemson. Notre Dame, after what they did this past week, they did impress me. I think they get it done. But I think this is going to be a very close game. I think NC State's going to be closer than USC was. Now, arguably the game of the week, number 2, Penn State, at number 6, Ohio State. Ohio State is rocking some very sick unis. I don't know if you guys have seen them. Those things are fresh. But, guys, this one has Big Ten championship implications on the line. Who gets it done?
Penn State's playing like the number 1 team in the country, and Ohio State has done a good job to get themselves back in the mix. But right now, there is one Heisman Trophy candidate and everybody else, and it's Saquon Barkley. Credit that to Lyle Goldstein. He's coined that term at this point. Penn State gets it done in Columbus.
Man, I'm hoping for a game that was half as good as last year. Last year we saw Penn State jump onto the national spotlight after that win against Ohio State, and I think they get another win this year. Ohio State has, I know they're ranked 6th, but I'm not sold on them. JT Barrett, I think, is insanely overrated, and I think Penn State pulls away. I think they win by 21.
I think this is Penn State's toughest matchup all year. Hands down. It's, like you said, Josh, Big Ten championship written all over it. If this game is half of anything as it was last year, we're in for a treat. But JT Barrett's been shaky. The Ohio State defense has been rock solid. I think this is going to be Saquon Barkley's least amount of yards all season long coming into this game. He'll still score probably 3 touchdowns. My guess one of them is on special teams, but he'll have the least amount of rushing yards he's had all season long in this game. Penn State. I didn't make a bet.
Ohio State is actually favored by, I believe, 6 in this game, so the general consensus is that Ohio State gets this done. Coming into the year, I was not high on Ohio State at all. I didn't think they were that good. I won't say that they're not living up to the hype or JT Barrett's overrated, because if you look at his numbers in the last few games, he's actually been playing really well. But look at what the competition has been. That's the thing. Look at the competition now. Ohio State. This is tough. I mean, if you look on paper, Ohio State. I mean, they've been blowing out their teams better than Penn State has been doing. But as Josh mentioned, I do believe Penn State is the better team. It is tough to win at the Horseshoe. I am going to go with Penn State, though, in this one, which does bring us to the worst of the worst, the absolute worst game of the week, the game you cannot pay us to attend or pay us to watch on TV. I don't even know if this game is going to be on TV, but it might be because it has an amazing field, probably one of the best fields in all of college football, arguably, and that is Texas State and Coastal Carolina, battle of the 1 and 6 teams, guys, who picks up their second win of the season.
Well, as all of the listeners know, we do attend Arizona State University and the beautiful Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication downtown Phoenix, and we know that the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers won the College World Series a few years ago. Chanticleers. It's a chicken.
It's a rooster.
It's a chicken. Let's get over it. Anyway, do we know who the Chanticleers defeated in the College World Series? Yes, we do. It was the Arizona Wildcats. And for that reason alone, I am taking Coastal Carolina over Texas State. Also, I think they're the better team. So, there you go. There's my reason.
Well, I used this last time. It didn't work, but I'm going to go with it again. As everybody knows, I'm a pretty big Mariner fan. They've got a utility guy by the name of Taylor Motter. Great hair, by the way. Absolute flow. Look him up. Went to Coastal Carolina. Was a stud there. Pretty big fan of his, so I'm going to support him. I'm going to go with his alma mater in Coastal Carolina.
You know, I have a good friend. His name is Sam, and Sam is very short. He's 5'6". That has nothing to do with the story. We just always like making fun of him because he's short. He is from California. He's a USC fan, Josh. There's that for you. Too bad. But Sam goes to Myrtle Beach every year, and he's a big Coastal Carolina baseball fan. So, for that reason, sort of same as Lyle's and Josh's, I'm going the Chickens, or whatever, the Chanticleers. You have to say it like you're in like the 70s in high society, like the Chanticleers. I'm going with Coastal Carolina. They're going to become 2-6 on the year.
Shout out to the UMass Minutemen last week who picked up their first win of the season. I did pick them, so I'm very happy on that one. Just to make this interesting, guys, I'm going to go with Texas State on this one because I'm trying to get some points back. But man, Coastal Carolina, all I can think about is that field because it looks delicious. Guys, that does bring us to the final game of the week. The number 21 ranked USC Trojans, Spirit of Troy, coming down to Tempe, Arizona for a matchup with the Arizona State Sun Devils. Now, sadly, guys, I will not be with you guys in the student section. I'll be with Mama and Papa Harris Highlights, as well as Grandpa Harris Highlights.
I'm going to be the only one in the student section of the 4 of us this weekend.
Yeah, you are.
What does Arizona State need to do to win this game? And they need to eat up clock. They need to stop USC on the first drive of the game. And the Devils, regardless of if it's 3, 6, or 7, they need to score first. USC's the better team. ASU's the hotter team. USC's the better team. I hate to say it, but after this week, ASU's going to drop back down to 500. I think the Trojans are just going to bounce back. Last week, they didn't show up. I think USC shows up this week. It's a close game. It will come down to the wire. Trojans by 4. I hate to do it. I really, really want to see ASU win this football game. I think the Trojans win by 4.
Are we all going to cheer for a Sun Devil victory?
No, because regardless of who wins, my heart is going to drop.
I'm really excited for this game. It's going to be great. ASU's playing some really good football. I know USC's coming off a tough loss to the Irish, and I think they bounce back. However, not quite enough to beat the Devils. I can't believe I'm doing it, considering, like I've said for the last few weeks, 3 weeks ago I said ASU wouldn't win another game the rest of the year, but I'm sticking with them again, and I'm going with the Devils. Also, little quick shout out look for me in the student section this weekend. I'll be hoisting a really nice sign bashing a certain USC backup defensive lineman. Look for me at the front of the ASU student section.
I think Lyle's going to be the first person all time to attack a backup player.
You know what? I'm sure somebody else has done it before. I'm sure somebody's bashed another player. A backup.
I still think what you need to do is on the backside of that. So you have to have a two-sided sign. On the backside of it, go after Sam Darnold a bit.
But to be honest, I like Sam Darnold.
Say Sam
like the way he
Darnold. I
plays.
don't know. Ask Madden.
All right, we'll see. We'll see.
All right. You know,
Tune in to find out. Tune into ESPN Saturday night, 7:45 ASU versus USC.
I think it's our good friend Dave Pasch on the call again.
I think you're right.
He's great. And maybe Greg McElroy, who has one career victory as a starter for the New York Jets against the Arizona Cardinals with a whopping score of, ready for this? 7-0. What a
God,
score.
how did that guy ever win a national championship? Well,
Beats me.
he was good at Alabama.
Yeah, he was. Anywho, I'm going to go with the Sun Devils in this one because why not? And I want to pick against USC because I can and I will. So go Devils, ASU.
I feel like there's at least one game a week where you go, I'm picking somebody because why not?
Yeah, no, that's my thing. It's because your extensive research on your worst of the worst. I have my why not of the week.
That's
and
fair.
it's going to be this ASU game because I think they're going to ride the high coming off, I think they have two-game win streak. So they're going to ride the high and they're going to jump 5 wins on the year. They're going to go to 5-3. And they're going to start getting a little bit of that national attention, which will then cause them to crash and burn. But hey, why not?
This is a tough one between ASU and USC. At this point now, if USC would have won this past week against Notre Dame, I'd be pulling for USC, mainly because they'd still be in the national championship hunts. They're officially done, which means now I gotta go with ASU on this one. If ASU can somehow win this game, they are officially going to be in first place of the Pac-12 South, words I don't think I'd say at this point of the year. So as ASU students, we're rooting for ASU to ride this momentum out, possibly make it to the Pac-12 title game, and who knows whatever bowl game they can make it to. It breaks my heart. My grandpa's going to have his heart broken when the ASU Sun Devils win, but I'm going to go with ASU in this one, guys. I hope it's a good game. It's going to be a late game, so for all those people on the East Coast, stay up and watch it. Stay up till 2 a.m. and watch some good football. But the Devils, they are going to be my pick to win. The spread, guys, I think I told this to Lyle. Brady, I don't know if you've seen it. Guess what the spread is in this game.
I forget.
Is it like 3 right now for
Enlighten
USC?
me.
Spot on. 3 points for USC.
I'm good at
Wow.
this betting stuff.
Which
You
is-
should come to me for betting advice.
Yeah, I need it.
Now let me ask you. Yeah, you can say that again. Now let me ask you this, Blake. Did you think you'd be saying ASU will be playing for Pac-12 South implications at any point in our 4 years?
I definitely don't think so, Lyle.
Which one did you think you'd say first? That ASU's in Pac-12 South contention or USC's out of the playoff race?
Neither. But guys, that does wrap up this episode of the Harris Highlights Show. If you're interested in owning some Harris Highlights merch, Christmas is fastly approaching. We're just about 2 months away. I know, it's coming quickly, and Santa, he does check those lists. Don't sleep on Chattanooga. Zane for Heisman and official Harris Highlights merchandise today. The link for the shop is in the bio below. Also, make sure you like us on Facebook as well as follow us all on Twitter. Those are all in the description as well. I know these guys like getting those Twitter followers up. And once again, guys, this episode was brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com and sign up using the promo code SCORE2, that is SCORE and the number 2, and you'll get a free entry into the NFL Sunday Million and NBA Clutch Shot contest with your first deposit, so go on there and make some money. For our expert college football insider Lyle Goldstein and our executive producer Brady Klein, Josh has for some reason left us to go FaceTime his girlfriend, so
For the second time in 2 weeks.
for the second time in 2 weeks and on the day,
Don't hate on him.
this has been your host, Blake Harris. Thank you, as always, for listening. Go watch some good college football this weekend, everyone. We will see you next week. Also, don't forget to vote in the Harris Highlights Top 25 poll this Sunday evening. Have a great weekend, guys.